hopefully he will they will be joining us very soon. So let's start there. The first is with the keynote speaker, Dr. Claudia Ringler. Before I will request Claudia to come on stage, Dr. Claudia Ringler has more than 25 years of experience in the agriculture economist. She is leading the International Food Policy Research Institute thematic area, and she is also the deputy program leader for the CGIAR Nexus Gain Initiative. And for this, she has been working in part of Pakistan and many other countries in India, in Africa, and also leading on the initiatives in the water sector. And she's graduated from the University of Bonn, Center for Development Research, University of Bonn, Germany. And so with this one, I will be requesting Dr. Claudia Ringler to come on stage and please give your keynote talk. Thank you.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be here today to give a keynote of why it matters to think across water, energy, food, and environmental systems. It seems to me that joint food and energy crises have become the norm. 3 have now taken place in just 15 years, as you can see on this graph, driven by climate change and other human-made crises, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and, most recently, the Russia-Ukraine war. That's where you see the big spike going up at the end. All 3 crises dramatically pushed up food and energy prices, as well as those of fertilizers, another source of energy, leading to an increase in the number of undernourished people worldwide. You can also see in this graph that the most recent crisis, with the addition of the war of Russia on Ukraine, occurred during negative GDP growth in low and middle income countries, linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, suggesting that high prices are hitting people with already reduced incomes. So this is the gray graph. You see negative GDP growth. This is extremely concerning when we have food price increases. As a result of these continuous interlocking and overlapping crises, the number of hungry people has now been on the rise for close to a decade worldwide. In 2021 alone, 150 million more people were affected by hunger than just 2 years earlier, 2019. And it is entirely unclear if or when the global community will come together to implement interventions to turn this around. I think this conference is an opportunity for Pakistan. COP27 in Egypt is an opportunity for the world, but it's not clear if anyone will take decisive action. I do believe that Pakistan will take decisive action. We have heard, I think, a lot of important statements this morning. I expect we'll hear some more today. Do we still have a crisis? When the first grain ship left the harbor of Ukraine on August 1, some thought the food price crisis was over. But this is not the case. Food inflation levels have increased in the last few months as compared to earlier this year. You can also see here in this map that food price levels in July-August 2022 compared to food price levels in July-August 2021 were more than 30% higher in Pakistan. Pakistan is thus one of the countries that falls under the highest food price inflation category. And I don't expect this to get better because of the floods and various other issues. And even so, food prices overall have come down compared to earlier this year. they do remain above the pre-COVID-19 levels. There are also new export bans. A key one is the September 9 ban by India of broken rice exports and the 20% export tax on several rice varieties linked to drought, heat stress, and in some parts of the country, floods. This one is very important for the globe. It's very important for Pakistan because India is the #1 rice exporter. And as we all know, Pakistan's rice production was severely affected by both heat stress earlier this year and then the floods. Also, the war obviously has not ended. There are many other wars raging, but the one in Ukraine seems to not end, unclear when it will. So we do expect more adverse food impacts. So they're very well possible. Even so, right now, some of the pressure has decreased from that part of the world. There are, of course, importantly, growing adverse climate extremes that further push up food prices and will continue to do so. And obviously, I guess the most well-known here and the most visible and with extreme impacts, as we've already heard, is the Pakistan floods. But if you specifically, as we're interested in water for food security, water security, energy security, we also have to look into the fertilizer price crisis. Continued high fuel and fertilizer prices dampen agricultural productivity and production with consequences that will only become visible in 6 months to a year. So right now we don't see those negative impacts yet. While most discussions on agriculture impacts have focused on fertilizer, and correctly so, because everyone, every farmer, if they can get their hands on fertilizer, affordable fertilizer, they would like to do so. We also should not forget that many countries rely on groundwater irrigations and therefore have to deal with high diesel and petrol prices as well. And these high diesel prices not only affect food production and food security, but also household water access and therefore domestic water security. All countries experience climate change and climate variability, and many experience climate extreme events. And some of these events are more extreme than ever before. And of course, Pakistan is one of the countries experiencing some of the most extreme extremes. Following on the heels of the extreme heat wave of May, famously the city of Jacobabad hit 51 degrees Celsius on May 14, the country experienced a one-of-its-kind flood disaster. The heat wave and ensuing floods were two systemic, interlinked extreme events, with the hotter air early in the year holding more moisture, and together with melting glaciers foreshadowing the floods. So this was known, it was coming. So it was no surprise it was going to come, just I guess the size and severity of the impact was not fully clear. Both climate extremes, the heat stress, that also was a climate extreme that most people have by now forgotten, and the floods have worsened the already high levels of water and food insecurity in Pakistan. We've already heard that 72 million people in the country are either moderately or severely food insecure, and 4 out of 5 people in Pakistan cannot afford what it takes to purchase and consume a healthy diet. We're not even talking about a sustainable healthy diet, just a healthy diet. Both water and food insecurity are exacerbated by the lack of reliable clean energy access. Fewer than 2/3 of the rural population are connected to the grid in Pakistan. Outages still last, up to 18 hours a day. So we really have to do something about this. All of these crises, water insecurity, food insecurity, energy insecurity, ecosystem degradation, are hitting a country whose nutrition indicators have been, for all intent and purposes, unacceptable. This slide summarizes a couple of indicators. Unfortunately, there's really no up-to-date indicators available. A key one that I'm always looking at is the status of children. Poorly nourished children have lower health and well-being, lower intellectual capabilities, and lower livelihood earning capacities. While this slide shows data for 2018, by 2020, which is the latest number we have, which is before COVID and many other crises, the share of children stunted, that is children that are too short, they're shorter than they should be for their age, has declined slightly to 36.7%, but once we will get new numbers coming in, I do not expect a downward trend to hold. The heat stress earlier this year is directly linked to poorer nutritional status of children, while the floods are directly linked to further poor outcomes for children via drowning, diarrhea, measles, and other diseases due to lack of vaccination programs, lack of other health services, lack of schooling, lack of earning capabilities of parents leading to early marriages, removal from schools, low birth weight in young and undernourished mothers, and so another generation whose livelihoods and well-being are below what they should be. In comes the CGR Nexus Gains initiative. Unfortunately, it is not a silver bullet for these interlocking crises, but it can help. The recent food, fuel, water, climate, energy price crisis demonstrate that food and energy systems are closely interlinked and that these systems in turn are affected by the continued degradation of the environment and water resources. Addressing and ultimately preventing such crises is a complex challenge. The Nexus Gains initiative, which operates in South Asia's Indus and Ganges basins, Central Asia's Aral Sea basin, East Africa's Nile basin, and 2 basins in Southern Africa, has 5 work streams that are shown here and have been earlier mentioned by Rachel. All of these areas are trying to intervene in different components of these overlapping crises without losing sight of the other components. The first area is co-development and scaling of Nexus innovations using foresight methodologies and trade-off analysis with a focus on the systems lengths. There's work already ongoing on improved environmental flow assessment, as well as the assessment of biodiversity threats and solutions. And we are also looking at the economy-wide benefits of some of these interventions, as we've heard, new dams coming online, alternative, more holistic storage assessments, etc. We do need better water productivity across scales. We have heard that with desal water, we might be able to overcome the water crisis, but there's always economics behind everything. So I don't see desal to provide water beyond Karachi in the near future. But we are happy to look into that, into the economics of desal, into the environmental impacts, into the solar requirements, solar energy requirements to get it going. But we also need to look at using groundwater more effectively as storage during floods and at other alternative flood storage systems, floodplains, etc. We've heard that building more dams is one contribution, but certainly not enough. Certainly not enough to address future floods and current floods. We also need to energize food and water systems. The energy crisis here has been going on for decades. It doesn't need to be like that. Solar systems have a very large role to play in Pakistan's future and can help to decouple food production, at least from the groundwater extraction side, food prices from energy price crisis. So when the next fuel crisis comes, at least with solar, we should be able to extract water. We've heard a lot being said by Dr. Simi Kamal about the importance of governance. I heard about the coalition on water that needs to be formed as soon as possible, bringing in stakeholders from across sectors. I just full-heartedly support that, and we are trying to support governance work in Nexus Gains. And finally, as Dr. Kamal has also said, we do need to provide capacity, provide leadership opportunities for women across water, energy, food, environment systems. We know that women can help broker solutions, They have unique responsibilities in the water sector, unique responsibilities for food security. They are hampered by not being able to access clean energy sources. So let's better understand what they need to ensure that children and families improve nutrition and water security. After my last slide, after the first 3 years of the initiative, we hope to achieve some of the following outcomes. We hope that we have a series of stakeholders, and I know we have academia here, we have government agencies. We hope that these next users, develop the systems with us and can actually use these systems to look at some of those trade-offs. Should we invest in another gray dam? Should we invest in managed aquifer recharge? We also want to develop a water storage diagnostic tool, and I think there'll be a presentation later this week on that. So again, to understand water storages in soil, in groundwater, in gray infrastructure, wetlands, what can we do to get better outcomes to address future floods? Don't want to focus a lot more on Nexus policy governance, dialogues. This is an important contribution. In fact, this event, I think, is one of those dialogues where we hope to hear from different voices of what needs to be done to do better. And finally, we have a goal of working with interested young, technical, and non-technical agents of change who are interested to make a difference across the water, energy, food, environment sectors. We do have a focus on women leaders, but obviously we are focusing on women and men, but we understood over time, over the years, that if we don't specifically mention women, it's more difficult to actually get to parity. So what we really want to get to is 50-50, parity. But to get to parity, we have to support women leaders. To conclude, systemic cross-sectoral thinking across water, energy, food, and environmental systems is central to the climate-resilient development of Pakistan, because these complex interlinkages, if not considered, are bound to worsen impacts for the poor, and that's what we've just seen the last few months. This is not the last summer of climate extremes in Pakistan, but there are clear opportunities to reduce the adverse impacts of climate change on the poorest, rural women and men. That's where we have to do better. These opportunities should be seized now, and Nexus gains through research and partnerships and impacts on the ground can help. Thank you very much.